So, what the heck is universal existing, and why does it matter to you? Basically, in a word, it's about caring. And that relates to your mental health, to my mental health. That's what I am. I'm a mental health clinician. I'm a therapist. And that's why I'm talking about universal existing. It does matter to you. It does matter to me. It matters to our health, our well-being. It matters actually to everything. And this episode will give you an idea of how it relates to everything about us. I'm a therapist. I've been a therapist for about a little more than 20 years now. Before that, involved in policy and nonprofits. I teach at the University of Maine in clinical social work and other social work programs in the graduate school. And it's through that background, it's through my work as a therapist and working with people every day, and my background in research and what I teach at the University of Maine that brings me to this conclusion of universal existing, and that it matters to you. It matters, again, to your health and well-being. It ultimately relates to caring, that capacity for caring that all humans have. It actually relates to that. And that's why this issue of universal existing is so important. So this whole work about caring started around, in the fall of 1982. And eventually I went to school to become a therapist, to pursue it more and to use it more in my practice, to understand it more in all sorts of ways. But about 5 years ago in 2016, I went a bit further because I was thinking, well, biologically it makes sense that living organisms or living beings are caring in order to continue living. But what about the universe? How do we relate to that? And universal existing brings us to that understanding. It merges the two. It helps us understand how universal existing and caring are actually the same thing when it comes to life or living beings anywhere, whether it's here on Earth or anywhere. To put a finer point on it, there really are two kinds of existing in the universe. There's passive existing and actively existing. So passive or passively existing are like rocks and atoms and things like that. But actively existing are living organisms or living beings, actively existing and caring. And so that's where you'll see this connection between universal existing and you and me, and our well-being, our health and happiness. That's where you'll see it. We always talk about how the universe exists, but this episode describes how it is existing. And there's a big difference in understanding what that is. The universe is not a noun. It's actually a verb. And everything, I mean everything along with it, is a verb. Shortly, I will talk about the Higgs field, one of the 9 fundamental fields of energy that gives us what we call nouns. Without the Higgs field, there would never be a noun in the whole universe. If you could find a Higgs switch and power it off, everything visible would disappear, and only existing energy would remain. That, all by itself, is a mind-blowing concept. So, what the universe is and what it's doing are the same. Existing. That's what the universe is, and that's what it's doing. It's the same. Existing. And maybe it's better described as a happening. The universe is a happening. It's happening. It is continuing to be happening all the time. That's it. The universe. That's what it is and what it's doing. Existing or happening. Similarly, what we are and what we're doing are the same. And that's called, or what I'm calling, actively existing.
introducing the idea of actively existing versus passively existing, which I will get into later, and what this all means to us. Another word then, and why it means something to us for actively existing, is caring. Another way to say it, and it's a better way of saying it. What actively existing is in the universe, for all living beings in the universe, it's caring. It's doing something. It's caring to continue existing. And like I said, that's what this whole concept of existing means to us. That's where it matters. But because crucially, actively existing is better known and understood by us humans as caring. Because that means more accurately what we are and what we're doing. And of course, like I'm saying, this whole episode, that's what it means to us.
In this next part, we'll explore the fundamental fields of reality. Again, what physicists have told us. And understanding there are fundamental fields, or what I will call fieldings, of reality. And that's how universal existing occurs. And it's through merging and emerging, first of the 9 fundamental fields or fieldings, as fundamental reality. Everything else is merging and emerging after that to create everything else that we talk about in the universe. Everything else I'll be talking about here, from quarks and electrons to atoms and molecules, cells, and living beings. 9 fundamental fieldings, and then merging and emerging after that.
So now getting into understanding the fundamental fields, which really are at the heart of understanding not only reality, but us as humans. So physicists have defined this as QFT, or quantum field theory, and they've been at it, I think, for like 100 years. And defining and refining over time all these different things I'm not going to go into because I'm not qualified and I will just make a mess of it. But physicists, they always talk about particles when they talk about fundamental reality. And they always talk about the duality of reality, or that somehow all of it is both particle and wave, or particles and waves. But fundamental reality just can't be a particle. Because when we think of particles, we think of particles of sand, particles of dust, which are nouns. I know when they talk about particles, they're talking about a measurement, but it's lost in time and velocity, all these things I can't begin to tell you about, but it just doesn't make any sense. It's just quantum particles just can't be fundamental, as in being a noun, because they are waves. And some scientists and physicists will just plain say it. They're waves. They're not particles, they're waves. Now, waves do become particles, or what we call quarks and electrons, after merging and emerging together, especially because of the Higgs field. But that's secondary. What's fundamental are the waves. However, let's go a little deeper here, because this leaves quantum waves as fundamental. But they're verbs. They're invisible happenings. They are energy, but they are not visible energy. Putting it a different way, the word energy is a noun, but waving energy is a verb. Because these fundamental waves are not nouns, we need to stop calling them waves. They are waving, or better yet, wavings. That's a much better and more accurate way to understand what's happening or what's going on. The same is true for vibrations, or vibrating, or better yet, vibratings. So physicists often talk about these waving fields as vibrations, or vibrations, and these measurements of the vibrations are what they call particles. But again, they're just measurements. They're not particles like we know particles to be. They're just like, oh, there's a spot on the vibrating or the waving. Anyway, it's another term they use is vibrations, but I just think I strongly believe it's better understood as vibrating. And then, ultimately, the same is true for fields. There aren't fundamental fields. There are fundamental fieldings because they're verbs, they're happenings, that's what's going on. They're not nouns. Those fields, we have to stop saying that they're fields because they're not. Fields implies nouns. They are fieldings, and that's inventing a word, I know. Maybe it's just a better way of saying it, like quantum fielding theory. Maybe we do that. Again, I'm not a physicist. It's up to them. It's just that they're verbs. They're not nouns.
Fieldings mean it's a verb. That reality is a verb. It's a happening, not a noun, but a happening. And it's not like it just happened once at the beginning of it all, like in the Big Bang idea. It's happening now. Right now, those 9 fieldings have to be waving or vibrating or happening and then merging. And what is emerging out of that is you and me right now. That's forever. That just didn't happen once. It's all the time, forever.
So here's how we get into why reality is a verb and not a noun. It starts at the beginning, or the so-called beginning, and the so-called Big Bang, which is actually a big emerging, as physicists tell us. And it is emerging everywhere, not like at one point in space, such that a big bang, implies. And very weirdly to understand, the universe is still emerging. It's always emerging. From the fundamental waving fields or fieldings to you and me. It's not like that happened once and it's done. It's just always happening. But at T0, as they call it, or time zero, it looks like, from what they tell us, temperatures decreased. It was like super, super hot. You think like being out on a 90-degree day is hot? No, this is like unspeakably hot. Kelvin and all these temperature readings. Anyway, it looks like when temperatures decreased, causing perhaps one field to break into 9. Physicists don't say there was one field. They don't have the experimental evidence to tell them there was one field or what actually existed at T0. But at a billionth of a second, they do. I mean, they do. Like within 1 second, they know everything. So you got 13.8 billion years ago. After 1 second, they know everything's going on. So yeah, I gotta think they're pretty close to really knowing what's happening before that billionth of a second. But anyway, they're scientists. They're good scientists. They're not saying they know what it is because they don't have evidence to say it. But anyway, let's just get going. So I'm saying at T0, time equals 0 when there actually is no time. But anyway, before time happens, there's this energy. There's one field of energy. That's what it looks like to me. But anyway, it looks like to me. That's 13.8 billion years ago. And that's an estimate, of course, but you know, their evidence keeps telling them that's what it is. Anyway, after 1 second, like I said, then there's 9 fields. Now, in the standard model, there are actually 17 fields, but 8 of those mass fields are just heavier versions of the essential mass fields, which are these: the up quark field, the down quark field, the electron field, and the neutrino field. So those are mass fields. There are 4 of those mass fields. And then you've got 4 force fields: the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the electromagnetic force, and of course gravity, the force of gravity. And then you got the all-important Higgs field. Like I said, without the Higgs field, we got nothing in terms of visible, touchable nouns, nothing. It's just be like those 4 other fields just fielding together, and there's nothing that we could see, touch, if you were there, you could see and touch. Nothing. The Higgs field gives us everything we can see and touch and smell and blah, blah, blah. And then there's merging and emerging. So anyway, these 9 fields, these are the fundamental everything, fieldings of the universe then and now. all this merging and emerging that happens with those fields and everything else I'll get to in a second. And they, of course, create the nouns. And like I said, it's the Higgs field. Higgs field with all the other ones combined gives us nouns.
So that's all there is on Earth. That's all that's going on all the time and forever. Starting with the 9 fields or fieldings of reality to you and me. It's all happening now. It didn't happen once. It's happening now. There was a beginning in terms of the universe becoming cool enough for all of the fieldings to start doing what they're doing, but they're still doing that and doing it now.
Now, then when you consider existing, merging, and emerging, hear what that is, what that looks like. So you start with those fundamental fieldings, vibratings, wavings. Start there. Again, it starts there and ends there, really. But anyway, with merging and emerging, then we start to get other things. And I mean things that are nouns. We can start naming them because that's what we do. We're humans. We name things. We have awareness and reflective awareness. No other creatures like us have this kind of reflective awareness, and we name everything. That's our fundamental problem in understanding this reality stuff, as well as mental health. Because we name things, it can go wrong. That's for a whole nother bazillions of episodes I'll be doing on this channel. But anyway, back to 9 fieldings. Then the merging and emerging. And that's my little symbol for merging and emerging. It goes both ways. Then from there we get up quarks, down quarks, and electrons. So those 9 fieldings of verbs, energy-ing, whatever you want to call it, ing, they merge, and what emerges from that are quarks, up quarks, down quarks, and electrons. And physicists know this. This is just cold. They know it cold. There's no more questioning when they talk about this. It's just, this is what it is at that point. Up quarks, down quarks, and electrons. Like some kind of weird names in the quark things, but it's a Irish, I don't know, 3 quarks for math, whatever it is. That's what there it comes from. Electrons. And then there's merging and emerging, and we get protons, neutrons, and electrons. So again, protons are this combination of up quarks and down quarks, same as neutrons, but a different combination. And then electrons are electrons. So that's those, of course, they're the building blocks of atoms, merging and emerging, everything together to create what is called atoms. And then they merge, and merging and emerging are molecules, chemicals, hydrogen, everything on the periodic table, molecules. And then they're merging and emerging eventually on planet Earth to life and cells. So again, life, as I've heard it many, many, many times described, is like proto-life to begin with, like molecules merging and emerging, and then some start living off the others. Energy is consuming energy, and then they start existing in a new form of life. And protocells are that. And then you get to cells, which are, membrane and this metabolism, energy, living off other energy, and reproduction. You got cells. From what I understand it, the prokaryotes are single-celled like microbes, and then the eukaryotes are multicellular. They come in next, which then create eventually plants, animals, you and me. So cells, again, prokaryotes, single cells, live for like a few billion years or something without any multicellular, the eukaryotes. And it's just remarkable. They're still living now. There are microbes in your gut. There are actually more microbes in your body than cells in your body. Again, mind-blowing stuff when you understand what they've discovered, the scientists have discovered. So you get to plants and animals, you and me eventually. Again, this is it. This is reality right here, and I'm not inventing this. This is what the physicists and the chemists and the biologists tell us. This is reality. I'm just changing one thing, and that's the verb understanding versus the noun understanding. That's it. Now, if you'd like to look at everything in reverse or backwards, that's another way of looking at it. Like, there's plants, animals, you and me. what makes plants, animals, and you and me? Well, it's multicellular organisms and coming together, these different functions to creating plants, animals, you and me. Well, what makes them? Well, of course, it's cells. It's life itself. It's living, actively existing, living cells. What makes that? Well, oh yeah, molecules, chemicals. That's what makes all that. What makes them? What? Of course, it's atoms. We know that. Clearly, we've known that for a long time. What makes them? Oh yeah, it's protons, neutrons, and electrons. What makes them? Oh yeah, it's these fundamental matter objects, up quarks, down quarks, and electrons. And of course, then you get to the deepest, what really, really, really is reality, and that's 9 fundamental fields, or what I'm calling fieldings. And you do that fieldings with merging and emerging, that's everything. Everything we know of on our planet and in the universe. And by the way, there's got to be other living beings, other parts of the universe. I mean, there's like trillions of planets, I don't know, whatever they describe. It's got to be, even if it's just microbes. And that's all that's ever has been existing on a particular planet. That's still living, just like you and me. Now, when it comes to understanding us, or what we are, and our mental health, this is where understanding existing gets very important. Or that there are 2 types of existing in the existing universe. There's passively existing. All this stuff we've already talked about. That's passively existing. They're just existing due to the conditions of the universe. That's it. The fieldings and the quarks and the electrons and the atoms, molecules, they're just existing. But what makes life so unique, it is actively existing. It's doing something to continue existing. The quarks and atoms, they're just existing. They're not doing anything. They're just plain existing. But life, anything living, is actively existing. And that's what this stuff is we've already talked about. Cells and the multicellular organisms, and then all plants, animals, you and me. Really important for us to understand what actively existing is all about, because it really matters to us. And in the end, it's just all, in terms of actively existing, actually passively existing too, it's emerging complexity, because the 9 fundamental fieldings are, that's reality, that's everything. And from there, these merging and emerging, and then there's emerging complexity. You and I are a whole lot more complex than a microbe. We're both, all of us, living beings. There's no better or worse. There's no bigger or smaller, maybe in size and in complexity, but not in terms of value, not in terms of worth. We're all the same. All living beings are actively existing, whatever the size and complexity they are.
The distinction between passively existing and actively existing is vital, because passive existing is just existing. It's not doing anything to continue existing. It's just existing. So quarks and electrons and atoms and molecules just existing. But when life came about, or living beings, they were doing something to continue. They were actively doing something to continue existing, from the very simplest forms, the proto-life, to you and me. Every living being is actively existing or caring to continue existing. There is certainly a different level of complexity between a microbe, a single-celled living being, and you and me. There's a complexity difference, but it's all the same happening, the same actively existing.
I've encountered so many scientists and biologists who describe life as purposeful or doing something, maintaining itself to continue living or to continue existing. The really well-known, at least in the West, ancient Greek scientist and philosopher Aristotle, he said, by life, we mean a thing that can nourish itself and grow and decay. So nourish itself, that's energy, consuming energy. And then here are 3 I found in a book written by Antonio Damasio, a leading neuroscientist at this time. All 3, like Aristotle, are from different Western thinkers, just to be clear, and at different times over the last several centuries. So there's Baruch Spinoza. He's a 17th century philosopher, and he said, each thing, as far as it can be its own power, strives to persevere in its being. The striving by which each thing strives to persevere in its being is nothing but the actual essence of the thing. And then Erwin Schrödinger, a 20th century physicist who wrote a book on life. I think it's called Life or something really simple like the book on life. Anyway, he wrote, when is a piece of matter said to be alive? When it goes on doing something, moving, exchanging material with its environment, and so forth. And then there's Antonio Damasio himself, who wrote in his book, where he got these other two quotes, homeostasis is the powerful, unthought, unspoken imperative whose discharge implies for every living organism, small or large, nothing less than enduring and prevailing.
So let's really be clear on this. All the different people who talk about the active nature of life or living beings, they're talking about caring. Caring is the organizing understanding. Not even a principle, it's an understanding. It's what's happening is caring. Now, loving is caring, but so is killing, to eat something, to metabolize or metabolizing. I mean, caring is continuing to exist or existing. That's what caring is. So when these folks talk about different ways in which life is doing its thing, the three I mentioned here, including Aristotle IV and any others, if you understand it as to what I'm saying it really is doing, it's caring.
All right, so now getting to the summary of existing and caring. So the universe and what it's doing are the same. Life or living beings and what they're doing are the same. It's all existing. It's all existing, continue to exist, continuing existing, which includes merging and emerging constantly, all the time, existing, merging, and emerging to explain us right now and everything on planet Earth millions of years ago, and everything in the universe except for life, unless it existed somewhere else, billions of years ago. But for us, it's all about actively existing, because actively existing is caring. There's no better word to describe what actively existing is than caring. That's what it means to us. So what we are and what we're doing are the same. Actively existing or caring. And here's where it matters, where all of this is meaningful to us as living beings, as human beings, as caring beings, which I believe, after 4 decades of work, exploration, and discovery, is fundamental to our self-understanding, our relationships, our emotional well-being, and our overall physical and mental health, because it's all explained by actively existing or actually caring. That's what it means to us. And then many, many, many more episodes on this channel will describe that in more and more detail. But that's what it means to us.
So there it is, from universal existing to actively existing to caring, and to you and me. That's what this episode is all about. It's about you and me, and it's about our well-being. It's about our happiness, our experience of joy, our relationships, of loving each other, of caring for one another. The caring is the same as actively existing, which is the same as existing, but caring is what it's all about. And it's why I've put this together. As a mental health clinician, that's why I've done this, is try to figure out what is going on. Why is it that we need this thing called love from one another? What does it do for us? Why does it exist? And it exists because you can see in biology, we need caring to continue living, but then you can see from the universe, we need actively existing to keep existing within the universe. We can see from the universe that it is existing, just like we are existing, but the difference is most of the universe that we know about is passively existing, but we are actively existing, which is caring. And when we understand that we're all connected, we're even connected to the universe, for crying out loud, we can understand how to do this caring thing better, with each other, for each other, with one another, to live joyfully, peacefully, and harmoniously forever. To discover this, we can do that. And that explains what universal existing means to us.